for Delver of Secrets. It's a little different than your typical Delver deck in that it doesn't have Tarmogoyf and it doesn't have Nimble Mongoose. And as a result, it plays stuff like 1/1s for 1. You know, the Delver deck has got a turn 1 play and has managed to protect it for the most part, but he has a little less to show for it.
Brad adds a Creeping Tar Pit to the board, one of my favorite all-time lands. 3/2 unblockable.
Yeah, this Creeping Tar Pit's probably just going to end up being a flag bearer for that wasteland. You know, Creeping Tar Pit, yeah, is, especially since he's playing Legacy, it's unblockable, it's very good at answering Planeswalkers. It activates for a mana cost that's actually reasonable to play in Legacy.
Yeah, and especially when you get into one of those situations where you're like, you've got the board pretty locked up, but there are no, you know, there's no creatures on board, and you just, or even if there are creatures on board, obviously you can just swing right past it. It can be very instrumental in victory out of kind of nowhere, just kind of innocuous little land sitting there for most of the game, and then suddenly turns on and is ferocious.
Well, it lets you win a game without putting a spell in your deck.
Yeah,
it lets you win the game with a land. So we see Brad just continuing to develop his mana base. He actually hasn't cast a spell yet this game.
And he's at 16 there, all from that Grim Lavamancer.
Yeah, well, then this is just a really good position for Brad. He, like I said, he hasn't cast a spell yet this game, and he still has a lot of life points to show for it. The two players are trading land drops, which plays really nicely into the Esper Deathblade strategy. He still has a hand of, you know, 2 Swords to Plowshares, 2 Brainstorms, a Wasteland, a Geist of St. Traft, and a Force of Will. So plenty of answers if he needs them, none that he has to play just yet.
And it looks like a Wasteland is going to attempt to deal with that Creeping Tar Pit. Brad is going to get a little use out of it, adding a blue to his pool and casting a Brainstorm in response.
Yeah, so Brad's just improving his draw slightly here. Usually you want to Brainstorm on a bad hand. It looks like he might ship away one of his lands. He might ship away the Wasteland. He has fetch lands, so remember, the 2 cards he puts back, he probably will not be getting again.
Yeah. So it was Brainstorm, Snapcaster, and I want to say it was that Flooded Strand was the 3rd card.
So we'll see whether or not how aggressive he wants to be here. It looks like he's putting back a Swords to Plowshares and a land. Yep, it's Flooded Strand and Swords to Plowshares what he's looking at putting back. He may want to keep the 2nd Swords. It depends how much more he thinks his lands will be attacked. We'll just dictate how many lands he actually needs to keep.
Right. He's got, what has he got? 2 in hand still? Wasteland,
yeah.
Flooded Strand?
Yep, and he's going to put back that extra Brainstorm and a Flooded Strand, it looks like. The question is whether or not to, he knows he has 1 land too many. Doesn't know whether he wants a Swords or a Brainstorm.
So it looks like he keeps the Flooded Strand and Brainstorm as the cards he puts on top. And Creeping Tar Pit is wasted by the Wasteland, and that was all at the end of Brad's turn.
Yeah, both players kind of playing just a staring game here.
Yeah.
Ryan Phraner, not even, now that he has 2 cards in his graveyard, electing not even to use them. Just getting the free damage while he can, throwing them so that he can throw 2 more damage over later.
So, Grim Lavamancer attacking, gonna knock Brad to 15. Brad's gonna say, I'm gonna knock myself to 15, crack that Flooded Strand. And we've got a Stifle in response from Ryan.
Alright, so Ryan is going at that mana base. So he has 2 lands down this turn. We'll see how many Brad can actually stick on the table.
Stifle on the stack, and Brad looks like he wants to respond with another fetch land cracked.
Right, remember, each of these actually is chipping 1 life point from Brad's life.
Yeah,
Brad's
which is
total.
exactly what the Grim Lavamancer's been doing.
Right, so all these 1s can actually add up to a pretty significant number. This time Brad's actually going to get to have his land, though.
Yeah, he does tutor up a Tundra there off of the Marsh Flats. And now the Stifle, I believe, is still on the stack. It is still on the table anyway, and it looks like that has resolved. And we've got a Swords to Plowshares out of Brad for that Grim Lavamancer, which is still currently attacking.
Yeah, so what's actually interesting here is that, you know, both players are trading lots of 1-for-1s we see. You know, a Stifle trading for a fetch land, a Wasteland trading for a land, a Grim Lavamancer trading for Swords. What'll be interesting to see is which player wins once the dust clears. We see that Brad has a Snapcaster Mage and a Geist of St. Traft, but Ryan also has a Geist of St. Traft in his hand, and I believe a Delver of Secrets. So it's really, normally at this point in the game, the Esper Deathblade deck is favored, but it could really go either way at this
Yeah.
point.
In a way, like nothing has really happened yet. It seems like neither player. They're really just starting to get going as far as casting spells.
Yeah.
There you see a Delver of Secrets that you mentioned, cast by Ryan on his turn, and Brad now untaps, draws for the turn. I think he found an Abrupt Decay.
Yeah, well, what happened is the players were using their cantrips to kind of jockey for position. They're trying to predict which cards will I be needing, and they wanted to set up a good hand to initiate this trading.
So Brad adds that Wasteland to the board, and it looks like he wants to Swords to Plowshares on that Delver of Secrets before it flips and gets out of hand.
Yeah, there's not really a better target in Ryan's deck for the Swords to Plowshares other than Delver.
Yeah, considering the Geist of St. Traft is untargetable. I don't know if Brad already knows that there's a Geist in Ryan's deck, if that's the kind of deck he's got, but I think he can probably take a guess and figure that out, considering there is white mana. There have been white mana sources cited, I think, in Ryan's deck. So a Daze on that Swords to Plowshares is going to force Brad to pay one, and I think he's just going to pay it here.
So this is the first time a 1-for-1 trade didn't happen. The fact that Daze didn't actually get to counterspell meant it was a 2-for-1 trade, and Brad's got to pull ahead one card right now.
Yeah. It looks like Brad may be done for the turn. Ryan with just a basic island in play, tapped. Brad with Wasteland, Tundra, both tapped, and a Polluted Delta.
Yeah, well, the worry
Untapped.
with bouncing that land, Ryan didn't have a third land, so it seemed like a pretty free roll to bounce that land. What it did mean is that if Ryan had drawn a third land here, he would not have been able to make Geist of St. Traft. It's going to be, because of how this game's playing out, you'd have to think that this is going to come down to Geists.
So a second copy of Delver of Secrets from Ryan, and that is off of the fresh Tundra.
Yep, Ryan correctly plays it off the Tundra in case Brad decides to Wasteland.
Yeah. So now on Brad's turn, Brad, I believe, has drawn a Flooded Strand for the turn. His hand, I believe, is Geist of St. Traft, Abrupt Decay, Flooded Strand, Force of Will, Snapcaster Mage, and Brainstorm. He's going to crack that Polluted Delta.
Yes, there's still a lot of options left for Brad. He wants to make sure that this Geist resolves, but even if it doesn't, he has ways to find whatever cards he needs right now. Because all the cards in his deck are good at 1-for-1ing as compared to cards like Stifle or Daze in Ryan's deck, all Brad really needs to do is to keep this game even, and he has to assume that he'll eventually be able to pull ahead if he does.
So what's the play here? Do you think he goes for the Geist?
Well, it seems pretty good to go for Geist of St. Traft right now. At the same time, he could also just make plays. He could also just try to get more advantage. He could Snapcaster or Brainstorm. He doesn't have to really worry about the Delver of Secrets because he does have that Abrupt Decay in his hand. It depends how aggressive he really wants to be here.
And he still hasn't played his land for the turn, and it looks like that's what he's going to do here. He's going to play that Flooded Strand, and if he does decide to play Geist of St. Traft, at least he has the option to play around Daze, barring a Stifle from Ryan.
Right.
Yeah, he is going to play and immediately crack the Flooded Strand, so he's got a plan.
Yeah, well, what this says is that he's probably going to try for Geist of St. Traft, and that's for exactly the reason you mentioned. If this fetch land is going to be stifled, Brad wants to know that before he goes for any sort of play.
So no Stifle, and Brad has 4 lands now.
Yep, he actually searched out Savannah here, which might be something you'd be... which, remember, his Esper Deathblade deck, as you noticed, is splashing for green right now for the Abrupt Decay, 2 Abrupt Decay in the main. The ways to cast that is that it does have 1 Savannah and 1 tropical island in the deck.
And there you see that Geist of St. Traft off of the 3 dual lands, leaving the Wasteland up to either pay for a Daze or potentially take out that Tundra.
Yeah, so Brad had the option between leaving up blue for a possible Brainstorm and leaving up Wasteland for the ability to waste Ryan off of mana. He's going to go for leaving up the Wasteland, and I believe the reason he's going to do this is because if this Geist resolves, I think he's going to immediately Wasteland the dual land.
Yeah, I agree.
What he doesn't want to have happen is he doesn't want Ryan to play his own Geist back.
And it looks like the Geist is resolved, so Brad is considering passing the turn, and he says go.
Alright, so he's going to give Ryan a chance to top deck the land. He's going to go ahead and on upkeep, and correctly, yeah, sorry, he's going to make this play on upkeep as opposed to making it on his own turn, so that if Ryan wants to stifle the Wasteland, it'll cost Ryan main phase mana to do it.
Very interesting point. So it looks like Ryan added a mana and then the Wasteland resolved. Delver is going to reveal the top card, and that is Brainstorm. So Insectile Aberration is online for Ryan. Now the Brainstorm is in his hand.
And he wants a lucky card, so he knows it's going to be a Brainstorm.
Yeah, I think he was just making sure it was only
just
one
one
card
card.
and not two, because, you know, sometimes those sleeves stick together. And the basic island's going to cast that Brainstorm, main phase, for Ryan Phraner.
So, because Brad doesn't actually play, the only counter magic he plays is Force of Will. There's kind of a race here. Brad does have a Force of Will blue card, which he's going to use to protect Geist of St. Traft. At the same time, Ryan has some of his own counter magic. There's going to end up being a fight when Ryan tries to resolve a Geist of St. Traft. But until then, Brad has free reign to deal quite a lot of damage.
Yeah, he's going to be able to Abrupt Decay that Delver. Obviously, can't be countered. He's going to actually counter this Brainstorm with the Force of Will. Didn't see what he removed. It could have been Snapcaster. Yeah, I don't see the Snapcaster in his hand anymore.
And that was a pretty aggressive play by Brad. He chose to Force of Will the Brainstorm as opposed to just waiting for a Geist of St. Traft. And it may have come back to bite him a little bit because he got 2 for 1. Well, actually, yeah, he got a 2 for 1 when the Daze then countered the Force of Will.
Yeah. So Brad left with 2 cards in hand, 1 Abrupt Decay and 1 blue card. I think it's Brainstorm, but no mana.
Do we not have an island? Oh yeah, sorry, it's in his hand from the Daze. Yeah. I was okay. And it looks like Ryan Phraner brainstormed into 3 lands.
One of which is a fetch land, though, so he's able to play and crack the fetch.
Yeah, it'll be interesting whether or not he wants to do that. Right now, 3 lands isn't the worst thing for Ryan Phraner.
Sure. So he plays that basic island again, replays it, and passes back. And Brad is going to immediately Abrupt Decay that Delver, and now swing in with the Geist of St. Traft and Angel, knocking Ryan down to 15.
Now, there's a lot of ways that Brad's aggressive play is really getting rewarded here. So you wondered, okay, that seems bad when your Force of Will gets dazed, but because you were saying the other thing you'd want to save that Force of Will for would be a Geist of St. Traft. Even when Ryan dazes it, that forces Ryan to pick up one of his lands and further delays a possible Geist.
Yeah, it's going to give Brad more time to swing with his own Geist. And with that Abrupt Decay being an unanswerable answer to that Delver of Secrets, Brad has cleared the way for the previous turn and now possibly this turn as well. I don't believe the only thing that Ryan could play, you know, as far as a flash creature is Vendilion Click, and Ryan only has 2 lands right now, so he's going to take another hit from the Geist and the Angel. And fall to 9. Now Brad passes back, I think, here, and looks like Ryan, end of turn, going to crack his fetch land.
But yeah, remember, Brad he just wants to protect this threat right now, and this next turn is going to be pretty pivotal. Ryan's going to be going for a Geist of St. Traft to answer Brad's only threat.
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure Brad has at least a Brainstorm in hand. We know he had 2 cards, he used the Abrupt Decay, but since then haven't seen what he's drawn.
Yeah, Brad's going to have to find Force of Will plus blue card, otherwise he's going to lose the Geist of St. Traft. And it may not even be enough, as we see Ryan for this turn draws his own Force of Will.
There's a Scalding Tarn from Ryan. Ryan now at 8 life after cracking that fetch land.
Yeah, a little dangerous between that fetch land and the Force of Will in Ryan's hand. If he plays it, that will put him to 6 life, which puts him dead to 1 hit from a Geist of St. Traft.
Yeah.
So it may not be that Brad digs for Force of Will with his Brainstorm. He may just be digging for a second Geist of St. Traft.
So the Scalding Tarn is going to drop Ryan to 7. He's going to find a volcanic island. And we're going to see that Geist, I think, momentarily to try to deal with Brad's.
Couldn't play it fast enough.
Yeah.
And we'll see if this is going to work. Brad does not have the counter spell to it in his hand at the moment. We're probably going to see a Brainstorm.
Brad's hand is Snapcaster. Oh, so he did keep a Snapcaster, or he drew one. He's going to probably just Snapcaster Brainstorm here, or Snapcaster? Does he have any other sort of counterspell that he could cast?
What Brad
Go ahead.
what Brad has found in the main deck, I think he's going to Snapcaster the Brainstorm. He has found his Batterskull. Granted, he found it without the Stoneforge Mystic.
Right.
So if this Legend Roll trade happens, Brad can just, for 5 mana, cast Batterskull.
Yeah. So it looks like we're going to go with Snapcaster, and Snapcaster gets forced. And so Geist of St. Traff resolves, Legend Rule happens, and the board is now clear. So Ryan successfully deals with Brad's Geist, but he is at 6 life.
Yeah, there's going to be another threat that he has to deal with. And we'll see that threat. The last card in Brad's hand is Batterskull.
Yeah, land off the top for Brad gives him the 5th land and access to that germ, and more importantly, that equipment.
So at 6 life, Ryan Phraner needs an answer now. He has 2 turns before that Batterskull is lethal, and he is contemplating how he's going to be able to deal with it.
Yeah, I think
he has a land and a Swords to Plowshares.
That's what I thought he had. Okay, so a temporary answer.
You know, it does buy him a fair amount of draws. When
Right.
he Swords a Germ token, Brad has to spend a turn bouncing the Batterskull, then a turn recasting the Batterskull. It gives Ryan time to find a counterspell. That said, it does gain Brad 4 life, and it is card disadvantages. Ryan Phraner's down to 0 cards again.
Yeah, so there you see the Swords to Plowshares to fog for the turn, and Brad with 1 card in hand. We haven't gotten a look at it, but passes the turn back. So I imagine we're going to see a returned Batterskull at the end of Ryan's turn.
And
Wasteland,
a huge Wasteland
from Ryan, and that is huge.
Well, it'll keep Brad off of 5 for the time being,
Right.
so he won't be able to recast the Batterskull.
So he returns the Batterskull.
And Brad has a pretty good surprise here. Well, he didn't draw the 5th land. If he drew something 1 step better, that's going to be
Stoneforge Mystic. Yeah,
Right.
so Stoneforge Mystic comes down, finds an Umezawa's Jite, and Brad can cast that here if he wants, but Ryan's just going to scoop him up, and we're going to go to game 2 here. That was a quite the game 1 between Brad Nelson and Ryan Phraner. Brad on Esper Deathblade, a slightly new take on it, so maybe it's Esper Geist Deathblade. I don't know what we should be naming
Esper
these
Geist
things.
Blade,
Esper Geist Blade.
Or
Esper Geistrite Shaman.
Still has
Right?
Deathrite Shaman too.
Esper Right Aid, Deathrite Aid, I don't know. So Ryan Phraner on Blue White Red Delver. Both of these decks using Geist of St. Traff as their hard-hitting win condition.
Yeah.
Then again, you could, of course, talk about Batterskull being pretty hard-hitting win condition
Well,
itself.
I would say a very few number of games in this match come down to hard cast Batterskulls and deciding who's going to win. In fact, this first game was pretty atypical in that both players allowed each other to develop their mana bases before they tried to put pressure on each other. And like we said, that favors Brad, but it's not impossible for Ryan's deck to win in that situation. Normally, we'll try to see Ryan push the initiative by being the more aggressive deck, just by virtue of being the Delver deck, but he is a slower Delver deck.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of overlap between these two strategies, and so a lot of it is a positional game.
Yeah, so if you just tuned in, I'm Joey Pasco in the booth with Matthias Hunt, coming to you guys live from Philadelphia, bringing you coverage of round 4 of 8 of the StarCityGames.com Legacy Open Series. Brad Nelson playing a deck that has recently been championed by Todd Anderson. Of course, Todd Anderson won 2 of the last 3 Legacy Opens with a Deathblade list, and on the way to that first championship from Todd had to defeat Ryan Phraner in the quarterfinals in Baltimore. So Ryan on the same deck that he had, and right now down a game to that same deck that defeated him in the top 8 in Baltimore.
Both these players no stranger to the feature match table, and I think they're really showing some of the new trends in Legacy right now. Deathblade, I'd say, is one of the most trendy decks right now. And Ryan, I mean, Blue-Red, Rug Delver has always been one of the most popular archetypes. It's going through a little bit of growing pains right now as it tries to adapt to the fact that people are playing Abrupt Decays and Deathrite Shamans.
Along with Rest in Peace in some cases.
Right, so there's a lot of hate out there for Rug Delver, and some things which have kind of knocked it off its perch a bit. So Ryan's taking, we saw some people playing Bug Delver to try to get around that, and Ryan's doing a little bit different of a take. Instead of trying to be so aggressive, he's trying to play bigger threats.
Yeah.
And doing it to a fair amount of success.
Yeah, let me know when they start playing Thundermaw Hellkite. The old standard trick. of making the blue-white-red lists.
Yeah, 5 mana is a lot to be paying in Legacy. I think
Yeah.
we might be waiting a while until we see that.
Yeah, if you can't, vial it in for 2 mana, you don't see a lot of 5 mana.
Well, the only 5 mana,
you have Force of Will, you have Batter Skull.
yeah, the only 5 mana cards you see in either of these decks are Force of Will, which doesn't cost 5 mana, and Batter Skull, which I guess
rarely
that
costs.
game it did cost 5 mana,
Right.
but that's not
like
why you
the
put it there.
Alternate casting cost on Batter Skull.
Right, so if you don't have Deathrite Shaman or Stoneforge Mystic in play, you can tap 5 lands to cast
Yeah,
this. So it's
exactly.
not advised, it means your opponent can kill it.
Right. So, 5 mana, not usually something you see somebody tapping in Legacy.
So pretty similar to the last matchup we saw, Ryan Phraner's strategy against an Esper Deathblade deck. He does have a couple cards. He has Vendilion Click, which is usually powerful in this matchup, especially in the way it interacts with Stoneforge Mystic. And when the player tries to put a piece of equipment into play, you can always Vendilion Click the equipment out of their hand.
Mm-hmm.
He has a couple other cards he might use. We may see him board in the final Geist of St. Traft, or maybe some number of red Elemental Blasts to proactively answer the fact that Brad's going to be boarding in Blue Blast is what you would expect.
Mm-hmm.
However,
Brad doesn't have those.
right, Brad doesn't have Blue Element
Yeah.
Blast. Instead, he's opted to play 2 Fluster Storms.
Yeah, which won't come in during this match unless he really wants a Force Spike effect. Or I guess it's a Spell Pierce
It's a
effect.
Spell Pierce.
More like a Spell Pierce.
I'm not sure he wants a Spell Pierce.
I don't
though.
think he wants a Spell Pierce that badly either. So we're underway. Ryan's got a turn 1 Volcanic Island, Brad with a turn 1 Wasteland, just like last game, and he's going to do the same thing he did
And that's
last
so
game.
aggressive from Brad to attempt that play of Wastelanding there.
Yeah.
I mean, the upside is that Delver decks, blue, white, red, rug, or otherwise, often play very few lands, and they can keep 1 land hands. So Wastelanding them is pretty strong. Though you have to assume if your opponent playing a Delver deck said land go, they have at least 1, if not 2 more lands in their hand.
Yes, you see a Stifle to deal with that Wasteland for Ryan, and so he keeps his land, adds to it with a second Volcanic Island, Brad down to 0 lands. On his turn here, he's going to go ahead and cast a Misty Rainforest, and we're going to see Ryan cast a second copy of Stifle, so Brad has 0 permanents.
Yeah, and we do see in Brad's hand he has brought in the Fluster Storm. And he
Okay,
does
so he
actually
did want a
he does
Spell
have a
Pierce.
Fluster Storm. He does have more lands as well. So now it's not really about how many lands Brad can have. It's about it's about tempo. You can really describe it. I've oftentimes heard players describe tempo in this way. If we were to keep a counter on each player of how many spells they've cast this game, Brad wants to make sure that Ryan's counter isn't, the difference between their 2 counters can't be much more than 2. If it is, then Ryan's gaining a serious tempo advantage and can really push that to win the game.
That's a definition of tempo I hadn't heard, but I like it.
Right, so right now, I mean,
Ryan's on 3 right now.
Right, Ryan's right now on 3-0 on
Yeah.
spells. That's a dangerous moment right there.
So during Brad's upkeep, Vendilion Click going to come down and it resolves, showing us and showing Ryan Geist of St. Traft, Deathrite Shaman, Tundra, Polluted Delta, Flusterstorm. Is that a Scalding Tarn? Not sure what the blue card is, and maybe another Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, so he has at least enough lands, and he has some 1-drops.
I think that's 3 Deathrite Shamans actually.
Yeah, that's 3 Deathrite Shamans. So normally Deathrite Shaman would be a card that Ryan would really want to take. The question is 3rd Deathrite Shaman a card he wants to take?
Yeah, I think here he maybe just, he has some time before Geist of St. Traft is even online. Is that something he decides that is worth putting to the bottom and giving
Right.
Brad an unknown card, or does he just want to play with that Geist in mind, with that information?
He has to have the consideration that he's not going to take any of these, because if you think about it, he wants to take something that Brad will use immediately. And the 3rd Deathrite Shaman won't be cast before turn 4. The Geist of St. Traft probably won't even be cast before until 3 turns out. So it's possible he just wants to leave Brad with that hand because there's nothing good to take. Nonetheless, taking Geist of St. Traft is always a strong play, and
Yeah.
Brian's chosen that one.
Exactly. So we're going to see a fetch land from Brad, a Polluted Delta that we knew was in his hand, and he is going to find an Underground Sea, and yeah, he's got to shuffle it still, and he's going to follow that up with a Deathrite Shaman.
Right. So yeah, and if Brad did have the Geist of St. Traft here, he'd be threatening to play one next turn. So if Brian doesn't have an answer to that, that's probably something he can't let happen.
Yeah, I didn't catch what he drew off of that Vendilion Click, but I think it might have been Swords to Plowshares, or that was the draw for the turn.
Yeah. So Ryan actually land flooding a fair amount here. It looks like his remaining hand is 3 more lands than that lightning bolt he just cast. 6 lands is, 3 too many for any sort of Delver deck.
So a lightning bolt takes out the Deathrite Shaman, and Vendilion Click comes over for 3. Brad has his second land in the form of a Tundra, and that second copy of Deathrite Shaman comes down. So Ryan must already have a plan for those Deathrite Shamans, or at least is planning on just hoping to deal with them as they show up. And he draws another land, so his hand is 3 lands right now. Luckily for him, he has a fairly big clock on the board. I mean, Vendilion Click is 4-turn clock at the moment.
Yeah, but Brad's drawn that Swords to Plowshares. So
And Abrupt Decay off the top there,
right.
too.
This Vendilion Click's only going to remain in play for as long as Brad wants it to remain in play.
Yeah.
This land flood, I think, is going to be fairly harmful for Ryan.
So for Brad's turn, hasn't yet played a land, but it looks like a Misty Rainforest may be the land drop, and that's what he's going to go ahead and do. Looks like Deathrite Shaman number 2 going to come down for Brad. And
So interestingly enough, these Deathrite Shamans, while still good against Delver, are not nearly as good as they are against Rug Delver. Remember, Rug Delver focuses on cards like Tarmogoyf and Nimble Mongoose,
right.
so that Graveyard Eating effect is really powerful. That's not actually as true here. Deathrite Shaman will still do plenty of work, but it's not as backbreaking for Ryan Phraner.
yeah, then that might be a concession to the cards like Deathrite Shaman. That's why Ryan's playing this particular variant of Delver. So a Swords to Plowshares from Brad will take out that Vendilion Click, leaving Ryan with just lands in play and just lands in hand.
And well, what Ryan's going to need, and this is a common situation Legacy players find themselves in, he's one brainstorm from having a very good hand again. And really, so you'll see him hold on to at least 2 extra lands just in case he finds a brainstorm.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that tempo spell count, as we were talking about, is now evened up.
Right. So
4
Ryan's
spells
cast,
each.
Yeah, 4 spells each. That's going to be your sign that Brad is pulled back into the game.
And there's a Ponder off the top for Ryan, so he's going to be able to hopefully get back into this, or at least get some spells so that he can get back into this.
Looks like he may be finding Ponder off of Ponder. There looks to be more lands. He probably will still keep the Ponder and then just recast on second Ponder.
Yeah, so he's going to draw. Oh, he found a Delver of Secrets, so he's got a threat there.
Right, so he does have a creature down. Interesting that Delver will have a little bit of trouble racing Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, Delver comes down and is, it's available to flip off of that Ponder that is on the top of Ryan's deck. So,
Looks like,
as we know, Brad has access to Abrupt Decay to deal with it, but...
Yeah, and it also looks like Brad has drawn Supreme Verdict, which he has boarded in. He has 2 in his sideboard, so he has plenty of ways to deal with creatures. He has a Supreme Verdict, he has...
Snapcaster Mage, a Flusterstorm, and that Abrupt Decay. Yeah.
So he has a lot of answers to spells right now. Brad really just needs to make sure he doesn't die, and he'll begin to press his advantage.
So Brad, with 3 lands and 2 Deathrite Shamans, has access to 5 mana here. If he wanted to cast a Batterskull, he could.
Right.
And they were going to see the Abrupt Decay for that Delver of Secrets from Brad.
Right, so because Brad's hand is so powerful right now, what he's, like I kind of hinted at before, what he's really just doing is protecting his life total. The Delver hasn't even flipped yet. He doesn't know if it's going to flip, but he just wants to keep these untapped Deathrite Shamans in play. And as long as he can answer what Ryan does, those Deathrite Shamans on end steps will start taking the game for him.
So off the top is that Ponder that we saw for Ryan Phraner. He's going to cast it here with 2 lands in hand and 5 lands in play.
He knows the top card of his deck is a land.
But he hit a Geist of St. Traft there.
So I think what we'll see is he'll probably take the Geist of St. Traft and then crack a fetch land so he doesn't draw the other 2 lands.
Yeah. And
interesting enough, the Geist of St.
That looks like the play.
Yeah, the Geist of St. Traft is answered by Brad's board. Remember, the Deathrite Shamans can just simply double block a Geist of St. Traft.
Yeah. And one of them will live.
Yeah, one of them gets to live when it happens. It's a trade that Ryan will probably not want to make. So he's going to need some help via a lightning bolt or something to push through that damage.
And we know Brad actually has an answer to the Geist should the Deathrite Shamans fail to be enough. He's got Supreme Verdict in hand.
Right. We're going to see Brad try to not cast that Supreme Verdict if at all possible. As the Death Rights, if Brad loses the Death Rights, suddenly he's
they're starting over. Yeah,
he's starting over. Brad's actually, I believe, still ahead on this board.
So there you see the Geist of St. Traft for Ryan after that fetch land. And Brad looks like he is going to activate those Deathrite Shamans.
Yeah, I think one's going to remove a land, and then one's going to remove a spell, and he's going to deal 2 damage to Ryan Phraner. Draw for turn appears to be a
Stoneforge Mystic.
That's also a pretty strong draw for Brad here. He's operating very well on just 3 lands. Right now, remember, Ryan has no cards in his hand. He has 2 lands. He has a fresh top of his deck.
And not that it matters here because it can't target, but Brad does still have access to Snapcaster Abrupt Decay should any Delvers show up or any other problem creatures to help along that Geist.
Yeah, he can even use it to kill an Angel Token if he gets into a racing situation. The Snapcaster range doesn't really need a target right now. He can use it just as a way to ambush the Geist of St.
That's true too, yeah. He's going to go ahead and cast the Stoneforge Mystic that he just drew for the turn.
And remember, we already saw in his deck. He's playing the batter both. The typical package of 1 Batterspell, 1 Umezawa's GTA, both in the main. No extra artifacts in the sideboard. Both of them presumably having been kept in.
So Batterskull is the choice from the Stoneforge Mystic. Brad now likely to just pass the turn here.
Right, kind of like I said before, Brad he's just being very conscientious of his own life total. As long as he can protect his life total, he's the better late game deck. He's already ahead. The only thing he really has to worry about losing to is Ryan somehow sneaking across damage.
Yeah, so you see it off the top of Brainstorm. Ryan flooding out earlier, but finding ways to manipulate his draw. But this Brainstorm finds land, Swords to Plowshares. So there's one spell there.
Yeah, say the Brainstorm was probably the perfect draw, especially when you have a hand of 2 lands. Unfortunately for Ryan, there were more lands waiting on top of the deck.
So he keeps the Swords to Plowshares off of that Brainstorm, puts back 2 lands. He does have a Scalding Tarn available to fetch and shuffle away those top cards, so we'll likely see that before his next draw. He appears to be considering Wasteland, and that is what he does. Wasteland on Brad's Savannah there.
Right, so he opts to take Brad's green source because it's the untapped land. He is leaving Brad a black source, so Brad can continue to deal damage to Ryan. I think that's a somewhat heads-up play though, because he's not so much worried about Brad dealing damage. I think what Ryan wants to prevent is Brad gaining life. So Ryan's the one who has to sneak across damage. Without green mana, it'll be harder for Brad to do it. He'll have to use a Deathrite Shaman every time he wants. He'll have to use the other Shaman every time he wants to create green.
So it looks like Deathrite Shaman gets activated, and Snapcaster Mage comes down for Brad.
Right, Brad's just coming to the board, just protecting his life total more. He has more than enough cards to win the game with, so he doesn't need to get full value out of that Snapcaster Mage.
I believe he still chose Swords to Plowshares as a target.
Sure, Swords to Plowshares it has flashback. I don't think he can flash it back.
Right, unless the Angel is an available target, and that's if Ryan's attacking.
Right.
And you can see Ryan in a rough spot here because that Geist of St. Traft is not intended to be a blocker.
Right, you really don't want...
And Brad's not even attacking generally. He's just using the Deathrite Shamans as his primary source of damage. He's got that Batterskull that is on the way here, and Ryan knows it. But
yeah, if the Geist swings, Brad's probably going to throw all his creatures in front of it.
And it does not swing.
Right.
So Brad untaps and plays a Wasteland of his own. Not terribly relevant at this point, with double red sources, double white sources on Ryan's side. Also a fetch land. So Brad's just going to pass the turn.
Right, he's pretty content here. He's going to just use Deathrite Shamans to deal damage, and step a Batterskull into play, then use Batterskull's Vigilance to attack and take down Ryan's life total without ever actually tapping a creature.
It feels a lot like Drown Yard in Standard. It's like pass the turn, drown you at the end of turn.
Doing everything on end step, not really ever never really taking down your defenses.
Yeah.
You know, that's how Control decks play. Ryan knows how the story ends.
Yeah.
And he's going to go ahead and concede the game. Brad wins 2-0 over Ryan Phraner, advances to 4-0 in the Legacy Open.
Yeah, with just under 10 minutes left on the timer, we don't have any other matches to bring you guys, unfortunately. But